Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our final episode of Finding Your Voice, OMES's podcast about the impact of the 5 voices on state government. I'm Krista Helfrey.
And I'm Kay Thompson, and we are very excited to have you two ladies with us today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Yes. Yeah, thanks for having us.
You may recognize a familiar face, Sophie Preston, our Director of Training, and our special guest today is Jessica Rimmer, who is a partner with Giant Worldwide, which is the company that developed and is implementing the 5 Voices and many other programs as well. So thank you guys for joining us. What a treat to have you here today in this beautiful, festive setting.
Feeling festive for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jessica, can you share the vision of Giant Worldwide and kind of the scope of that company?
Sure. Well, as all of you all know, it's a really compelling vision. Our goal is to raise up liberators in every city and sector in the world. It's a really big vision. So we train and certify guides, consultants inside and outside of organizations all over the world. We're in, I believe getting close to 200 countries at this point where we have certified consultants, guides in those countries. And then inside of organizations, just like we've done with Sophie inside of OMES, where people are working inside of their own organization to implement the tools. So our tools, I think they're the best tools in the world. I mean, that's really my goal, is to make it well known that Giant's tools do great work. And with the tools, what we're trying to achieve is liberation, which liberation is just fighting for the highest possible good in the lives of those that you lead. And so 5 Voices is kind of the premier tool that we use to get started with groups as we're bringing liberation into organizations.
That's excellent. It's like a trickle-down approach.
Absolutely.
The top
Yeah.
and getting those motivated people in there to share that message. Like
And
Sophie.
looking for those catalysts, right? Looking for those catalysts inside of the organization who act as the spark, right? They start the work, they start the fire, and help us liberate organizations from the inside out.
Absolutely. And Sophie does a really good job of that.
She does.
She's so excited that I get so excited.
Yeah.
I'm like, tell me more.
Yeah.
I get excited because Sophie's excited. So,
And those tools though, most curriculums, it's almost like their goal is to make something that's really hard for you to understand. And you're reading and you're looking at that very complicated visual and you think, okay, someone needs to help me kind of decipher, like uncode what this is, and then I might be successful. But the difference with Giant is they made those tools to be instantly applied. Like, I understand it. I can also train it really easily. And someone else in a very short space of time has now picked it up and they're probably using it at their dinner table that evening. That's the curriculum I like.
Yes.
They're the tools that really are exponential. They can just take off and have great impacts straight away.
Absolutely. So what are kind of some of the specific tools that you've found to be most effective?
Which is my favorite today? What's the flavor of the week today? My all-time favorite, and actually I'll let you share your story about 5 gears too, but know yourself to lead yourself. This infinity loop signals you never graduate the school of self-awareness. That to me, I just got every time. It never fails. I think we have this norm in probably worldwide, but especially in today's society, that when you graduate school and you've got those letters by your name, that you now know everything. And I remember graduating from law enforcement in England and being told my first day on the job, you know nothing. And I thought, I do. I was top of the class. I know what I'm talking about. Wrong. There's so much more for you to learn every single day. And that tool helps you remember that fact. You can learn something every day, and every decision you make has an impact, whether positive or negative, creates a reality. Everything. We're not just talking about negative consequences. We're also talking about the things you do from the strengths that you were given that are creating incredible consequences that are impacting everybody's reality in a really great way. And I love drawing awareness to those things, and everyone's tendencies are so different that it's quite nice to get specific with the tendencies and be able to show people, hey, you're changing the world from that specific tendency, or you're ruining everything, or you're causing, a little bit of riffraff in the team, a little bit chaos. So how about you?
I'm kind of with you. I have this like seasons of what I love the most, right? I'll get onto the Liberator Mindset tool and I'm like, have you seen this one? Have I showed this to you? My friends used to make fun of me because I would literally pop out the physical toolkit at lunch or whatever. And I'm like, that reminds me.
It's always in my handbag.
It's so good. I have always just given mine away. Like I've always just given it away to someone and I don't have it anymore. And so then I'm like, do you have a napkin? Can I draw this? All of the tools do so much powerful work. One of the tools that I think did a ton of work on me personally was the 5 gears. And Sophie just finished a program that I did where, again, I think I say, this is my favorite tool about every tool, but the gears really was impactful for me because it helped me tune into the way I wanted to be intentional with relationships. I'm the type of person that loves to get things done. I call it goal achievement high. Like I get a goal achievement high whenever I am achieving tasks and goals and, moving things forward. But what I realized through Giant was that that same tendency served me really well at work, but it undermined my relationships, undermined my relationships with my team, but most importantly with my family. And it really led me to be more of an abdicator than a liberator in my family. And I have 3 kids, they're 10, 7, and 3 at this point. But at the time, when we started with Giant, I had just had number 2. And I kind of made up my mind that I was going to dedicate car time to my kids instead of car time to my work. Because I would make phone calls in the car and it sounded like really professional, but at the same time I was being angry and shushing my 3-year-old in the back seat. And I just, stopped working in spaces that were meant for a relationship. And I really reaped a pretty precious reward with my 3-year-old. I have really good relationships with my kids. I think my 7-year-old will never know the kind of mom that preferred working over being intentional. But the tools just helped me flip that switch from accidental to intentional. And I think the other thing about it is like, it's not one of those things, to your point about never graduating. You can't just learn them and then leave them. You have to learn them and keep using them. So we get to choose every day to be a liberator. I get to choose every day to be intentional, or I could be accidental, but those are really my only 2 choices.
Right.
And I like the simplicity of that. I get to wake up and am I going to choose intentionality today, or am I going to let my life be lived by accident? And just that one simple choice to be intentional has changed everything.
I love that we get to give these nuggets of wisdom everywhere we go. And I want to share a nugget of wisdom that you gave to me. And it might sound silly, but I think it's going to have an impact to anybody listening as well, especially anyone that has children. So something that you said when I was going through the X-Core group is that you made the switch to when your children come in the room, you say, "It's you. There she is. Hi, it's you." Just make them feel so special. And I thought, oh my gosh, I want to do that. And so I did. I've started doing that to my 4-year-old son. And he comes in the room and I'm like, "You, hi, hi, Isaiah, it's you. How you doing? What's up, dude?" We'll give him a fist pump and we now have a handshake. And this boy feels on top of the world. And it's just made a huge difference because I too love goals. I like achieving things. I'm kind of a get stuff done. When that became the OMES mission, I was like, hallelujah. And it can be hard to stop working and shift your attention to
shifting.
The little ones and the big one that you might have in your life as well. And my husband really responds well to that as well. You, hi, you. So,
I mean, all the tools are different. One of my favorite sayings is to let the tools do the heavy lifting. I think sometimes as leaders, we can put a lot of pressure on ourselves. Like, I have to figure this out. I need to be the smartest person in the room. I need to always know what's going on. And it's like, once you learn the toolkit, you can kind of just mentally go through the pages and go, do I have anything for this? Is there a tool that is going to be helpful here to help solve the situation or frame this conversation in a healthier way? And I think just having the North Star of liberation, like the support challenge matrix, right? Like my original leadership reality was overly challenge. That's not working. Overly support. That's not working. Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, abdicate. I don't know what to do. And then when I figured out that really liberation is the North Star and we're not going to get it right all the time because that's not possible, but we can figure out how to get better and better and better at calibration. And we're always moving in that direction. That creates a different leadership reality. So just having that framework, having that North Star with all the tools is so helpful. So I highly recommend every leader having a toolkit. And of course, I'm quite biased towards ours.
There's part in the curriculum that we train where the voice gets to say its liberation statement. And Giant has made some great liberation statements based off those general tendencies that each voice has. And every now and then we run into a group that really want to create their own liberation statement. Fabulous, we can do that. And then we went one step further and paired it with the speaker-listener activity. And so now we've got nemesis voices in what we say is like the hot seat and then the cool seat, being able to read their liberation statement and then have it paraphrased by their nemesis voice back. And that was a flex that we as the catalyst in the organization saw a need for, and Giant gave us the autonomy to be able to do that. And so we're really grateful that you can assess that group, see those needs as the subject matter expert in facilitating, and make those shifts to really liberate that group, have those great outcomes.
Do you ever have any like pushback that people just don't really want to participate, or
some of the voices are resistant to change, perhaps?
Yeah, and this is that's a great question, because me as a more accidental connector back in the day, I mean, I'm always going to have those accidental moments, but I was striving for 100% buy-in. I really want everyone to believe it so that you can experience the world in the way that, or a similar way that I have. It's been great to have that switch from accidental to intentional. And I don't want everyone to live a connector life, but it would be great if people could live an intentional life. So yeah, in that accidental space, I was working really, really, really hard to get 100% buy-in. And I think I talked to you a little bit about this. Jessica's somewhat of a mentor. And Jessica had talked about, well, your goal is a little bit misaligned. You do your job how you can do it the best. And the outcome will just be what it is. And naturally, we get a high level of buy-in because Giant did such a good job, because we are working on ourselves as facilitators first, because we're able to bring it in a certain way. But the reality about buy-in is, for organizational change, you don't need 100%. And also, I'm not going to force anybody to do anything. I'm going to put tools on the table and say, what you dealing with? You like any of this? Try it on for size, and then maybe come back next week and trade it in, and we'll talk about it, and we'll issue you, a new jacket, a different tool. And that approach has probably assisted in the buy-in that OMES especially has seen, and now it's just really taking off like wildfire statewide. So
what about globally?
Yes, lots. I actually really enjoy the skeptic in the room. Like, that's one of my favorite things. And I can usually tell by body language or questions or whatever. And sometimes I get like outright challenge in front of the whole entire room. And then it's about like, how do I handle this in a way that's really, really gracious, but also clear? Because it's not liberating to embarrass somebody for being skeptical. And so I always welcome the skepticism. In fact, before I encounter it, I usually am like anti-selling, right? Like, I'm kind of the opposite of a connector by nature. I anti-sell. I'm like, listen, it's totally fine wherever you are in relationship to this content. Like, I was skeptical for a while. There's no way that this can be as good as, certain voices sell it to be. Come along at your own pace. And I think the openness, now I'm not lacking belief in the power of the content. I totally believe in the power of the content. I just know that my efforts at convincing some will prove the opposite results. And so the best thing that we can do is do a great job, understand that people are going to come along at their own pace, and that learning is a journey, right? So learning is a journey over time. And that's one of the things that makes these tools really, really different is this isn't something to learn and to box check. It's something to examine and to take in and to decide, does this really help me be the kind of person that I want to be? And sometimes the answer to that is no. And there's probably about 20% of people that are never going to come. And you have to accept that, right? Like, to focus on that 20% that's never going to come is to make an agreement with frustration. And I just think that that's totally a waste of time and energy. And I don't have any extra time or energy, so I'm not going to waste it there.
Yeah. And I think the law of influence is an ironic one, because the more you try to influence, almost the less influence you have. But the more you just work on what you can control yourself, the more influence you do have. And I think can be quite a hard lesson for people to learn. You can read a lot of literature out there about follow these steps and you'll gain influence. And I think foundationally, it's just about you focusing on you, control the controllables, and see what happens next. Kind of ironic.
Well, and it's different, like hearing, oh, this is a great concept, it's going to change your life, and then seeing it change someone's life for the better. It's like, okay, I do want that after all, because I can see you've tested it and it works.
Right.
Well, bringing it back to Oklahoma, I know we've seen and heard from our guests a lot of great experiences with these tools. Do you guys have any particular favorite stories you can share with us?
Oh, that's a great question. Sophie, I might have you go first. I will say, listening to last episodes of the podcast, I sent that podcast episode out to so many people in the Giant community, because I was like, listen to these people completely. There's no incentive for them to be saying that this has been impactful, and listen to their stories. So I will think about a good story, but I think, Sophie, you might have a better one faster. My
all-time favorite story was at the beginning of the implementation in OMES, when you start to doubt, is this going okay? We haven't done a pulse check yet, so you're really just like an amoeba floating, just waiting for some sort of evidence to suggest you're on the right path. And I was in calibration, which OMES does to be able to calibrate ratings of performance of employees, and it's been an equitable tool that we've used and I've really enjoyed. But when I was in calibration as a supervisor, there was another supervisor that was calibrating their employee who said, well, last cycle, I rated them needs improvement. But since then, I've realized I'm the nemesis voice of this employee. And if I get really specific, they're doing their job well, but it's not how I would do it.
Wow.
Oh, that was just that wink that I needed from the universe to say, it's working. That's an incredible outcome, because that employee who may have been tussling with that supervisor, really not knowing, what am I doing wrong? Look, per my job descriptions, per the goals that have been set out, I'm doing the job and I'm meeting standards and maybe even doing really well in some cases. But that supervisor was butting heads with them, not seeing it, because we speak our own language the loudest, we hear it the loudest. And because of that, it can be very tempting for that bias to have us rate those that don't speak our language differently or unfairly. And so when I heard that in calibration, I did the connector thing and I was like, everybody,
did you hear what she said?
Do you know what just happened? And they were like, yeah, that's really cool. And I don't know, I don't remember, and I didn't take in that moment who that employee is, but I just hope that they're still enjoying that relationship that has now been grown because of the 5 voices that we implemented quite early on. It's been over a year now since that happened. So hopefully there's more stories like that too.
That's incredible.
Sure. Well, on the last episode, Kelly had talked about how there were 2 supervisors that could not work together. And then after they went through that, like, they finally understood that there were nemesis voices. I think it's amazing to see it real world implementation, because it's great theory. It's great, tools. It's great learning, but to really go out and use it, and everyone that takes a hold of it and the change that happens, it's just so great. It's just
it's liberating.
Perfect. Yeah, right? It's liberating. Yeah, there you go.
And to be able to say, you're everything I'm not, let's be friends, is quite wonderful. But our natural instinct is to be like, you're everything I'm not, threat. But in the workplace, that doesn't work. We definitely need the contribution, and we need to unlock the potential of all these voices, because when we do, like you say, it's a liberating environment to work in, and that feels good. Like, I want to come to that environment to work.
Absolutely.
I've got probably 3 stories bouncing around in my head, but they're not all state of Oklahoma. But I will say, I was doing a really large event for the U.S. Navy Relief Society. So really big event. We were going through the voices, and I had never had so many people at every break. Like we would say it's 10 minutes, and then 12, 15 minutes later, I'm still like, I'm so sorry. I have to like start back again. People every break were coming up and talking. One break, this woman came up to me and she was in tears, which, I mean, like, guys, this was our first day, you know, she was in tears.
Yeah.
And she said, I was about to quit my job. And I love the mission of this organization, but I felt so misunderstood by my boss. But at the last break, she came up to me and said, I understand what it's like to be on the other side of me. And they had like this major like reconciliation kind of, and this connector voice felt all of a sudden understood, valued by her boss, who was a guardian, and they just had natural conflict on the basis of what one expects to see and what the other expects to see. And so I left kind of tearful from that event because I thought, wow, like we literally just allowed someone to remain and find meaning in a mission that they wanted to serve anyway, but it was the interpersonal conflict that was rubbing together and was about to cause one to leave. And that's what happens all the time. You know, they say that you don't leave jobs, you leave bosses, right? And so that was really convicting to me when I was a boss of people. Oh my gosh, what am I doing? How am I demotivating my people? And these tools give you a legitimate way of altering your pathway. Does it work 100% of the time? Of course not. Of course not. That would be crazy. Like we would be, you know, pay me $1 million. I will fix all your problems magically. But the stories are undeniable. And I mean, I tell the story about OMES and how you all have done implementation and you've aligned people according to 70-30. When I'm not here in this room answering this question for you guys, I brag on you guys about the way that you all have implemented and really held on to the way that these tools can change culture. So,
and this next year, the sustaining content's coming. We've got altitude groups lined up, and each division has an Ascend program. So now that we've rolled it out and we're sharing the language, it's like we can really get stuck in. And there's multiple curriculums. We've got curriculums for days, for years that we get to follow. So
I'm so excited.
That's exciting. I know. I was like,
next level.
Excellent.
Well, we merged our team recently, and so like we did the our team training and we did liberation statements, and one of them that really like stuck out to me was this woman doesn't want to speak about her personal life. And I was like, oh, okay, like I'm a connector, I'm going to tell you everything about myself. I think that is a fascinating thing to do with just within teams, within agencies, because it helps people tell you their boundaries. And so I'm not sitting there going, hey, what'd you do this weekend? You know, like
how's your husband?
Yeah.
What are your kids up to?
Yeah. She's never going to tell that. So I really, when we did all that, I found that the most fascinating because I would have never expected someone to have that boundary because I don't have that boundary and everyone should think just like me. So
no, and the tool that talks about the level of self-preservation that someone can have, I think is a really important one because we're really talking about finding the balance. And if your wall of self-preservation is double lined, it's very thick and it's cemented in, and we know nothing about you, then we might have transactional relationships. And for some teams, transactional relationships might be okay. But then for other teams, like a communication team or a learning team, it's really important that we have a little bit more than transactions. And you don't have to get rid of your wall of self-preservation and just let it all out. But what is the impact of allowing us to peek over that wall a little bit?
All right.
What's the impact on the work that we do, on the collaboration that we can do, and how we can serve? And so, finding that balance when your wall might be completely, you might want to build it up just slightly, just have it like knee level.
Right.
So the stuff that happens behind closed doors, we don't worry about that. But then other people might want to, take those down a little bit, and we can find this space where trust can exist, where relationships can happen. And we're ultimately serving those missions that little bit better than we were accidentally.
Well, I would love to talk to you guys all day. But we are going to be mindful of your time. So we would love to invite you to share any last words or visions for the future.
Yeah, so my last words are, this is not something that was ever designed to box anybody in. It's for some people, the beginning of an exploration, an adventure. We're going to go on an adventure, and it can be a bit daunting and sometimes a bit scary, a bit uncomfortable, but it does get easier the more you apply it, and you're not going to be boxed in. It's suggestions of ways that you can choose to improve areas.
Choose
of
your
life.
own adventure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
You get to choose the path. It's a hopeful tool. Definitely bringing it back to the state of Oklahoma and the Hope Initiative that's going on. Like it's a hopeful curriculum where you can now see a pathway forward to a brighter tomorrow or a brighter next week or a better relationship with those around you.
I would say that learning to lead yourself is the highest form of service that you can do for another person.
Mic drop. Drop the mic.
Yeah.
We're done.
Episode.
End of episode. There we go.
Facts.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think when we fail to lead ourselves, people have to clean up the mess. But when we lead ourselves really, really well, it's the best thing that we can do for the team that we lead, for the kids that we parent, for the spouse that we've chosen to dedicate our lives to, for the friends that we have. When we show up as an intentional version of ourselves, we are serving people well. And so I think, self-leadership is really an act of service.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, ladies, so much for joining us.
Thank
it has
you.
been an amazing talk and conversation. And thank you guys for watching. Please find this anywhere you get your podcast. And that does it for Finding Your Voice.
Thank you.